Start with roll.
Director Assad Lucas.
Here.
Director Goldstein.
Here.
Director Lockley.
Here.
Director Mitchell.
Here.
Director Potter.
Here.
I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as stated.
So moved.
Second.
Director Assad Lucas.
Aye.
Director Goldstein.
Aye.
Director Lockley.
Aye.
Director Mitchell.
Aye.
Director Potter.
Aye.
Go ahead and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Start with a superintendent update.
I will be very brief tonight. It's a busy time of year, as I think many of you know, and some of the things that are most significant that are moving in the system are things related to your agenda tonight. There are some things that, in terms of budget preparation for next year, we're asking you to start taking action on, things like the 5-star online lease, for example, or at least setting aside money for that, continue to acquire buses and other things for next year. So budget continues to move forward. You'll hear more from Susie about that tonight. Negotiations are done with one group, and you'll be taking action on that tonight, and we hope perhaps as early as tomorrow night to be done with our certified discussions. There's a lot of hiring going on, but really the big heavy lifting parts of the system I've updated you on, or you're set to hear more about it from members of Cabinet tonight. Beyond that, I'll just mention that at the last meeting, one of the speakers asked that I read the book Lawn Boy. I got a copy of it at the end of last week, but I haven't been able to start reading it yet. But I hope by the next time we're assembled, I can tell you what I conclude based on my own reading of that book. So that's what I have. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Director Potter, update.
All right, over the last few weeks, it's been pretty slow in my world. We've had some emotional things going on in my family, so I've been grateful to be there for them and my friends as well. I was able to attend a PBL today at STEM Launch with these adorable little first grade students that taught us all about light pollution. And it's always fun to get into the class with them and see what they're doing. So thank you to them for inviting me out to their class.
Thank you. Director Lucas.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. So I've visited a couple schools over the last, well, actually just 2 days. Had the opportunity to visit Holstrom K-8 yesterday, along with Board President Goldstein, and just learning more about Holstrom K-8 as the GT magnet school in the district, and how they are, all the ways being innovative and other ways that they are supporting our GT students. And not even just at Holstrom, but even throughout the district. One of the really neat things is Colleen Ehrlich, who's the principal, also serves as the president for the Colorado Association for Gifted and Talented. And so she's a huge asset for our district, for our GT students. But yeah, a lot of great things happening. So this morning, I also visited Leroy Elementary. And so Leroy is one of the schools that has an effective needs program. Got to learn more about that. And then just toured different classrooms. It was really fun. Every time we walked into a classroom, there were at least a handful of students, if not the whole class, would get up and come and run and hug the principal, and who's Tracy Stoffer. And so personally, I will always hold a special place for Tracy in my heart. So when I started as a parent in the district with my oldest, it was her first year as the AP at Thorne Elementary. And so she's all her Betsy Miller were all I knew as principal. So, but it was great just to see the school, catch up with Tracy, but all the great things that they're doing. I got to also attend this past Saturday the Adams 12 5K and fun run that was hosted by Lisa Reed and her amazing, fabulous team. They did a great job organizing it. It was just a lot of fun to engage with families and students throughout the district. The other cool thing about it is one of the special guests was Jason Romero, who helped distribute the scholarships to students who received from the Aim for the Stars scholarship. So that was really fun. Another kind of thing is Jason Romero. If anyone doesn't know of him, definitely look into who he is. So he's the first blind athlete to run, he's the only blind athlete to run across the United States in 57 days. Yeah, he's a former Paralympian. He's just an amazing human. He's a longtime family friend of ours. He and my father-in-law are best friends. But the other thing is he has his blindness, his eye condition for his blindness is the same condition as my youngest. So he's been a great support for us personally with that. And then the last thing I kind of want to just talk about is our 5-star foundation here in the district. So I'm the liaison for the board, and for those who don't know what the 5-Star Foundation is, it is a nonprofit that supports our district in many ways. You know, their main goal is obviously to help with student success, but I just want to share some highlights that they're doing because it's really huge, and they just actually received a really big grant that I'll talk about as well. But so the foundation helps with our resource closets throughout the district, if anyone knows what those are. They're stationed in some of our schools. It's just to help families in need. They distribute clothes, food, emergency supplies, hygiene supplies, things like that. And they've been utilized over 3,500 times so far. They also launched the 5-Star Trial website, which is connecting students to career fields, classes, and programs in the district to explore and prepare for careers, and then connections to local companies that are ready to hire students and continue their career pathways. The site also features student stories, career statistics, and highlights accessible, meaningful career pathways for all. They have launched the Yes Fund just last month, and this is a small grant program that removes the barrier of money to help teachers and students thrive. So just a few things that this is funded, that the foundation has funded with this is they helped students pay for concurrent enrollment in AP Chemistry. They secured a jazz trio to talk about careers and play with the Westlake's 6th grade band. And then they matched donations from the staff at North Glen High School to help students compete in the HOSA competition who were unable to pay to participate, so otherwise would not have been able to do that without that support. The other really cool thing is they are celebrating their first tiny house built by students who attend Future Forward in the construction program. And then the house is being donated to Access Housing to provide stable transitional housing for young adults who are aging out of the foster system. So then they are able to complete their high school diplomas and secure a college and career pathway. They also just received a pretty big grant. It's almost $3.2 million in the COVID ARPA grant funds. A little over 1.3 are going to go to funding the resource closets. A little over $1 million will go to funding Summer Explorers program in the district. About $270,000 will go to funding employee health and wellness, and about $487,000 will go to funding COVID-19 response team, health and wellness. So yeah, amazing things that the foundation is doing. So another thing is, if you're not familiar, definitely look into them, the great work that they do for our district and our students. They're also hosting their annual event at the 5-Star Classic, or the 5-Star Classic at Topgolf on June 9th. So which will help continue supporting our district. So, and then lastly, I just want to give a shout out to our teachers and district staff. Yesterday was National Teacher Appreciation Day, and we're celebrating all week for Teacher Appreciation Week. But educators and staff should be celebrated every day for their dedication and commitment, determination, and follow through they show for students on a daily basis. So the work is greater than just educating our kids. For many, many students, they are a stable support that our kids need to be successful and thrive. And then personally, as a parent, I know that every single one of my kids' educators have made a huge mark and have touched them that they will remember forever. So, so thank you to all of our educators and district staff for all you do for our kids. And then that's it.
Thank you. Director Lockley?
Yeah, certainly a busy time of year. I will just take a second to highlight, certainly excited as we move into warmer weather and have the opportunity to do different celebrations and activities outdoors. I did get to attend the Lions Club relay that took place at North Stadium on Sunday, which was a really cool event. So approximately 20 or so schools, 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders participating in relays. Just a great opportunity to see hundreds of kids just excited to be out in the sunshine, running around, but certainly an opportunity for students to build and develop some of that teamwork. A relay is sometimes a complicated race, and definitely some executed it a little better than others, but it was just an opportunity to see them run, which was really great, and schools really cheering on others. There were definitely a lot of just really great athletes, but a ton of just really great students being excited to be together and cheer on their teammates and other schools. Lots of schools represented, not all of our elementaries, so hoping maybe in a future year we can get them all out there and all represented, but was just excited to be out there and just to say a big thanks to all of our educators. It feels like we're at a time of year where things are starting to wrap up, but I know that we've still got a lot of educating to do in the month of May, and definitely some assessments that still need to be completed as we, support our students and celebrate all of their academic successes this year.
Thank you. Director Mitchell?
I don't know if I can talk quite as fast as Jamie, but I'll give it a shot. And just following on the assessments, we've got kids that, everybody got their SAT scores back today, so some people are very excited. And then AP testing is starting, and we're coming into a lot of seniors, counting down maybe even the hours that they have left until they get to say goodbye. So it is a very exciting time, and then I guess, there's lots of season sports teams still going. I just saw bands performing, so I just think there's all kinds of culmination of the year and semester, and just a lot of excitement and finishing up some things and getting ready for summer. I did also get to go to Holstrom, and it really was a valuable and insightful visit to learn more about just how much work goes into trying to differentiate the instruction for these kids that have very different educational needs, and it is a great place for learning these kinds of things, and then being able to take that research back to a broader audience and then to other schools in our district. So there was a lot of great stuff there, and it was really fun to see how excited the teachers were, which is just about any building you go in and you get a chance to visit. Our teachers it's just great to spend time with them and get to see them in action and seeing their students responding, and why they're here every day, because to see those lights and that energy in the room, I guess that's where they get their rewards. I also did get to go to the Legacy 2000 Job Shadowing Fair. That's the juniors coming out with their work from this year, where they've gone out and they've explored career opportunities for helping them try to figure out what they might want to do post high school. And I just continue to be amazed at the skills that these students are demonstrating. You can walk up and ask them a question and they don't even hesitate. They just start, telling you about their experience and are very engaging and animated. And I can say, a lot of kids I talked to were very excited about some of the things they learned, and they did some really neat projects and got to really see and feel and learn about different career opportunities. And then there's other kids that did 2 or 3 and said, I'm really glad I had this experience because it really helped me find out that this might not be the right place for me. And I think parents really appreciate that before you spend, investing and trying to get the kids into those opportunities to find out that that's not really what they want to do. So I think my daughter did 3 different ones and wasn't very happy with any of the 3. So we'll keep looking. But I told her, I said, that can be your plan, just exploring what's out there and all the different options. So we're going to try that. I also wanted to recognize the Teacher Appreciation Week. And I just think, it really is a calling. And when you see teachers in the classroom and what they do every day, just the nurturing of our students and these children and even young adults, and lighting that fire in them to create, have a life long learning and interest and wanting to explore and dig into things. I just think it's one of the most underappreciated professions in our country. And yes, our teachers are highly trained, but I also believe that we underestimate that role of parents, some that may stay home, the village, the managers that are, helping these teens as they're in their first jobs. And just, I just think that there's a world out there that we really need to recognize as our collective selves, and how important that is, and try to find ways. I think financially, we can do a much better job in rewarding them, but I also think that's not the only thing they're looking for and the only way to support them. I think there's lots of different ways and opportunities we can create to just show how much we support and how vital that work is to creating future prosperous communities and a well-rounded society. So I will continue to do what I can to impart that message and advocate the importance of well-funded, well-maintained facilities and program-rich public schools. So I think there's going to be lots of opportunities to have some of that dialogue. I also wanted to shout out to our teachers, because later in the agenda, we're going to be talking about our adoption of a new literacy curriculum. And this really is much bigger than just a literacy curriculum. We're not just swapping one out and putting another one in place. It really is a new way with lots of different tools and techniques, and to think about how to teach literacy, particularly early literacy, to children. There's a lot of science, and it's going to be a little different way of thinking. We've had some things in our schools that approach it, but it required our teachers to take 45 hours of training online through CDE that we weren't able to pay them for those hours and compensate them, as well as, that the amount of work that they were putting in. But hopefully our teachers will begin to see the value in that training and this new curriculum, and being able to put that together, as well as where we will continue to roll out supplemental and other interventions and work that can support some of our most challenging students who really can't learn to read any other way than through this methodology. Putting this in our gen ed classroom gets it right in the forefront and will minimize the impact to many of these students who can only learn to read this way, but all students can learn to read this way. And it just requires that it be very explicit, very systematic. And this is something that's been very important for my family. We fortunately had the resources to go out and get this instruction for our daughter. But many families don't have that opportunity and don't have those resources and don't have the ability to take their children, for these hours outside of the school day. And so this is so critical to the foundational learning that's required for students to have and be in place by third grade, so that when they get to fourth and fifth grade in those ongoing classes, that they can read to learn and really engage in all this content and all the great enriched programs that we have. So I want to appreciate our teachers for the work they're going to undertake in this next year. I think it's going to be very challenging, but hopefully it'll be very rewarding to see you be able to reach students that you haven't been able to break the code for, and find a way to help them grow and learn and get on track as early as possible and minimize the possibility for the mental impact it has and the ability for them to maintain and achieve their lifetime dreams. So again, I want to thank everybody for the work that we're going to undertake and the lift that's going to happen, and hopefully again we'll be able to see the work and the rewards come as we work through this in our district. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I too want to recognize that it's Teacher Appreciation Week. I find it kind of ironic that it's at the end of the school year when the teachers are probably pretty exhausted. But everything we can do to just kind of boost them through the rest of the year and just to make them understand that we appreciate them all year is important. A week ago yesterday, our IBS facilitators, I do a little work with one of them on occasion, and he needed me to step in. So I went to Fort Lupton, and I facilitated their negotiations. And I had to say to them that I had never been to Fort Lupton, and I have lived here for 40 some odd years. But I really enjoyed going there. I enjoyed meeting them, and they enjoyed telling me something special about Fort Lupton. So each of them had to tell me something. Then we had our own negotiations the next day. We're starting our marathon rounds where we're going for 8 hours. On the last Thursday, I was commandeered to chaperone a field trip. I went to CU Boulder with Thornton Middle School 8th grade, about half of them. We went to the planetarium where we saw a show on Arctic exploration, and then we got to see the planetarium stars, and we got to do something called the Ice Bucket Challenge, where you stuck your hands in ice water for a couple of minutes, and they played some freezing song, like Ice, Ice Baby, or Vanilla Ice was one of them. Another one was Let It, what is it? Let It, from Frozen, Let It Go. And then you had to tie a knot, because they wanted to show you what it's like to be in like this sub-zero climate and have to work. And then we took a walk along, they have a scale model of the solar system at CU. And so I was with my daughter, she was the teacher, and she's leading him, and she makes me bring up the rear. And I love my daughter, but she's a little directionally challenged. So if you know where the solar system is, you get closer and closer to Folsom Field, and the planets get farther and farther apart. And if you look far enough, you can see the pole for that next planet. And right before, I don't know, Jupiter or Saturn, she starts going to the left, and I'm at the back of the line. It's like, no, we have to go to the right. And we got to it, and the kids really had a great time with that, because it's a real hands-on display in a sense. It's also replicated at the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., and of course the people who designed it are from CU. And then we got to try on some of the uniforms that they wear in the Arctic to stay warm. And then they had a green screen, and you could pick out your background, and I now have a picture with a polar bear. And then they got to eat at the dorm cafeteria, the C4C. If you know CU at all, it's an excellent food court, basically. And And the kids were like just in awe. And one of them said to me, he goes, "Do they make all this fresh?" I said, "They do." And I have to say, the kids took a lot of food, but they ate it. You know, you get kind of crabby about kids filling up their plates in buffets and not eating it all. And I have to say that these 8th graders from Thornton Middle, I felt were just so well behaved. They really got into the feel of the college campus, and I hope that it inspires many of them to pursue that. Then, see, I typed this all up, and then I left it on my printer. Saturday, I could not, I'm sorry, I couldn't make the 5K, but I did get to go to Legacy High School for a TEDx youth event that was planned by Jack Bourneau, a junior over at Legacy High School. And if any of you know Jack, I think he was in 4th grade when he was on Shark Tank. And won on Shark Tank. And so he's a real entrepreneur, and he's just an amazing kid. I'd never met him. I got to talk to him a little bit, and I got to talk to his parents. And then I also got to listen to a bunch of TED Talks from kids and some of the concepts that they addressed. One kid who was in the foster care system, kids about gender identity, kids about graduation requirements. And then the way, if you've ever seen a TED Talk, they go on for like 10 minutes and totally without a script. It's amazing, and it flows, and they're really great. And we have a lot of kids from Adams 12 represented here, as long as other places. But this was one of the first events that they've had, and they really do hope they get to have more. Then I got to go on Monday with the superintendent and a couple other folks from Learning Services and the CTE. We had a world champion in the DECA competition this year from Mountain Range, Kate Morton, and so we got to go surprise her, and she was surprised. And it's just amazing what the DECA does over there at Mountain Range. So that was fun. I visited on Tuesday. I went to North Star, and then I went to Holstrom. North Star Elementary, the principal, Grace Taylor, showed me around, showed me all the different classrooms and what they're doing in all of them, and just gave me so much personal story about every classroom in that school and all the great things that they're doing there, and some of the challenges that they have. And one of the challenges I'd like to make note of is parking at that school. If you can't get in the parking lot, you have to park on the street, but you can't park near the school because the neighborhood doesn't allow for it. So I'm just gonna put that out there. I was able to find a parking spot. Then I went to Hellstrom with Director Asad Lucas, and it was Passion Day, basically, and they were all doing their passion projects. We had, she had, I get the purpose there why we were invited on Tuesdays. Some of the passion projects we saw, one of them was crocheting. Crocheting is a very important activity to help with emotional stress. So, the kids at Hellstrom are all real high achievers and gifted. And so they have a lot of those. There was a class doing Rube Goldberg machines. There was a class doing yoga. There was a class making little robots. So just all kinds of fun things for them to do on Tuesday. And then this morning, I went to the PEBC breakfast. Public Education Business Coalition and our superintendent and a couple others were on the panel talking about some of the needs in our schools in terms of teachers and the teacher shortage, and it's real. And some of the things that, ideas that for the business community of what they can do to help with public education and our staffing shortages. And then I went to Arapahoe Ridge where we gave Nicole Diaz the, Nicole, the Certified Employee of the Year. She is a preschool, works with kids with autism. She got the Certified Employee of the Year. And then that's it. Lots of stuff. I was busy. Okay. Well, that's what happens when you are retired. You can do that. All right, on to board committee liaison reports. We have the DAC and the LRPAC. Why don't we start with the DAC?
I can take that one. So this was the virtual meeting for the month, but the focus of this meeting was really recruitment, retention, and onboarding for the DAC, getting new membership, and then getting resources together to support the members. They are actually working on a model that has kind of a membership team, so members from the DAC who are continuing on helping support the work of reviewing applicants and reaching out to folks, helping them understand what expectations are, what the involvement is, what the DAC work really looks like, and they're also looking at kind of getting a list of kind of skills they need to fill out the work of the DAC. Some of the reporting and putting things together requires, graphic design and some of that work, and, folks who have potentially HR skills or, different kinds of things, being able to put together a list and share that with the community to get folks who have those skills to make sure that they have a robust team of folks who can fill out the needs of the group. So just excited to see them really start some recruitment work and looking at getting out there and reaching out to a lot of different pockets of the community to fill out that committee, and then hit the ground running because, as we mentioned earlier in the year, the UIP moved up from January to October, so that work, a lot of that is really happening during a time where the DAC would normally be a little bit more quiet, and so they talked about their summer schedule, and so it seems like they will be meeting at least monthly throughout the summer so that they can keep that work going. So good work, and looking forward to continuing through the summer and then a new school year.
Okay. LRPAC. Or Courtney, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I was not able to attend the meeting because I was healthily eating an avocado and sliced my finger open. So I spent my visit getting stitches. So I was not there last week. Sorry.
Sorry. LRPAC met too, and we got the first blush of something that I'm not going to spend too much time talking about because I believe Priscilla's going to talk about the blueprint, our long-range academic plan. And so we met as an LRPAC and got to go over it and give feedback and all this kind of stuff. And then we also had the blueprint 2022 meeting, task force meeting, which is kind of a offshoot of that with a few extra people. But other than that, that's what we did. So our next item on the agenda is public comment.
Good evening, everybody. The Board of Education welcomes public comment to learn about the preferences and concerns of the Adams 12 five-star community. The board thanks all individuals who have expressed their viewpoints in writing. All written communication has been shared with board members. To ensure everyone will have the opportunity to participate and the board's work is done in a professional and respectful manner, the board wants everyone to understand the expectations for public comment. The board requests that everyone remain in front of the stanchions at the foot of the ramp, and no one approach the dais unless invited by the board or superintendent. Our board meetings are open to all members of the public. Speakers are personally responsible for assuring their remarks and any items presented are suitable for an audience that may include students and children present or watching the live stream. Please respect student confidentiality and refrain from identifying individual students in your comments. You are welcome to communicate directly with school staff and the board by email rather than in public comment if you have concerns regarding particular students. Audience members must permit the speaker to be heard. Should an individual or group of persons disrupt the orderly conduct of the meeting at any time during the meeting, verbal warnings will be given. Upon further disruption, they will be asked to leave the ESC. If the person or group refuses to leave, they will be escorted from the premises by district security officers. Once requested to leave, re-entry to the building this evening will not be permitted. Disruptive conduct includes any verbal or physical actions that interfere with the board's ability to attend to the business on its agenda. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board. Speakers will be called to the podium 3 at a time. Please wait in line there, and when it is your turn, use the microphone and state your name and city of residence before beginning your comments. If your comments or point of view have been stated by a previous speaker, please state your name, city of residence, indicate your position, and that your thoughts have been previously stated. I will inform speakers when they have 30 seconds remaining with this sign. Please begin to wrap up your comments at that time. Speakers will be informed when time has expired. Please end your comments at that time. Neither board members nor the superintendent are obligated to respond to comments or input, nor are they prohibited from doing so. In the presiding officer's discretion, time for public, board member, or superintendent comment may be suspended or increased, or the meeting temporarily recessed, depending on the nature of the comment or the length of the remainder of the meeting agenda. Public comment is the only time during the meeting that participants may address the board unless engaged by board members or the superintendent. Any handouts or information that you would like to give to the board should please be given to Lee Coca here to my right. The board thanks you in advance for your participation tonight. The first speakers are Alicia Covello, Savannah Schneider, and Therese Morin. If you could use the microphone, please, and you will need to turn it on. And wait just a second. There you go. It should be good.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. So my name is Alicia Cavello. I am a resident of Florin. This is regarding Stargate failing to keep students safe. And I understand Stargate is a public charter. It's a little different under the district, but I do feel that the district and the board do need to know. With a particular student, there's been multiple incidents where the student has choked other students, punched students, used weapons against staff and students. Multiple times have done death threats to multiple students, and the administration there is fully aware. My son was involved with 2 of those incidents, 2 of the major ones, and as a parent, I am very frustrated, understandably so, I would say, that the administration hasn't done enough to protect our students, and these occurrences are getting increasingly worse. And basically, one of the things that I wanted to mention is that the administration at the school has been told multiple times by students, warning when this particular student was, doing things, threatening them, harassing them, antagonizing them, going up behind them. My son has told me he doesn't feel safe at school, and that is heartbreaking. He's been going to Stargate since he was in kindergarten. And I did actually even write the principal, and I let him know because I wanted to ensure that my child was not going to be bunked with this particular student at an overnight field trip. When I first wrote to the vice principal, I got a response of, I've forwarded your request. Well, in the fall, they had already assured myself and the other parents that our students weren't going to be put together, and they were going to keep them separate as much as possible because they weren't going to basically redo this kid's schedule to keep him out of the classes with these other kids. Well, I come to find out that one of the students that he choked, his teacher assigned one of the kids he choked with him at the same table. That's insane to me. You don't know if that kid has any emotional problems from this, anything. I mean, that would be like you're having somebody sit across from their abuser, pretty much, their assaulter. That's horrible. So I was dumbfounded when I found that out, which kind of prompted the email. And when I forwarded your request, I was like, really? It's not a request. I'm demanding to know my child's safe. So I did send the email to the principal, expressed, hey, this needs to be known that, I don't want my child to be bunked with this kid. My child's afraid to go to school. He has to be on guard at all time. He told me he makes sure he knows where the student is because he's afraid he's going to bring a bigger weapon, a knife or something, or a gun, and there would be an issue, obviously. The principal did not even acknowledge my comments about my son being afraid to go to school. The response was, okay, well, he won't be bunked with him. I can assure you that. Literally a few weeks after that email, a huge incident happened, and you guys might already be aware of it, but
Ma'am, your time has expired.
thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Hi, I'm Savannah Schneider, and this is Hi, I'm Catherine Berman. We both signed up for times because we weren't sure if we had signed up.
Yes.
But we plan to speak together if that's okay.
We are both teachers at Thunder Vista P8, and we are also the advisors for our GSA.
At our GSA meeting on Tuesday, our students collectively wrote a letter to the board of Adams 12 five-star schools in the community. We are the members of the Gender, Sexuality, and Acceptance Club, GSA at Thunder Vista. We are who we are, not to upset people, but because we don't have a choice. We are strong and we are not ashamed. GSA is not just for the LGBTQ plus community, but it is a safe space for all students. This is our first year having a GSA, and we are already a community, a family. We value the friendships we have made and the support we have received through GSA.
Without a GSA, students do not know about the LGBTQ plus community, and this can lead to confusion, guilt, and shame for LGBTQ plus students. We believe that the district should try to educate all students about LGBTQ plus community and should support all students by having a GSA at all Adams 12 schools. Here are some of our voices.
Before I came to Thunder Vista, my old school didn't have a GSA, and there was no acceptance for LGBTQ students. It was confusing, and I had to deal with classmates being homophobic. GSA has given me acceptance in myself, more love for my community, and supported me in coming out to my parents, 8th grader.
As a person who isn't really accepted by their parents, GSA has given me a safe space and a community while I am there. Without it, students feel like a freak or like they don't belong. Everyone can have a sense of belonging. They can have a safe space to vent about their emotions and have friends. They see that they aren't alone after all. Another 8th grader.
From a student who identifies as straight, I want to support everyone regardless of their gender or their sexual orientation. I want everyone at the board meeting to accept that people are people, and if they identify as anything, they are still people, so don't treat them badly. 7th grader.
I am a 7th grade student, and before I came to Thunder Vista, I didn't know who I was. Because I had no knowledge of the LGBTQIA plus community, I thought something was wrong with me, as everybody else in my class seemed to know exactly who they were and who they were and were going through the exact same things that people described. Me, on the other hand, I felt not quite one gender, but somewhere in between. So when I came to GSA, I was finally able to discover myself. That's from another 7th grader.
When my closest friend came out, I supported him, even if I didn't understand the community. But when I started to discover more about the LGBTQ plus community, I really enjoyed learning more about it. I just wish I knew about it earlier in my life. So while I still try to figure out what my sexual orientation is, I just hope that we could teach students about this amazing community. 8th grader.
I always thought I was straight, but then I joined GSA. The minute I heard the term bisexuality, I finally had a term to describe how I felt about my life. GSA has helped me to discover who I am, and I am super thankful for that. That's from a 7th grader.
I joined GSA to discover more about myself, but with that, I also gained a community. The people I met through GSA have become such great friends and supporters. They accepted me for who I was and not for who I was expected to be. 7th grader.
When I first joined GSA, I thought I didn't belong and felt a bit left out. Then I realized that it was a safe space for everyone, and I started to enjoy it more and more. Now I come every time there is a meeting, and I enjoy learning about the LGBTQ plus community, and I understand that no matter who you are, we are all family. That's from a 7th grader.
As someone who just recently figured out who I am, it is nice to have a safe place to go every week to let out any of my feelings. It is nice to have people that actually listen to you and care about who you are. I wish that everyone would accept people in the LGBTQIA+ community. This place helps me a lot. 7th grader.
Upon joining GSA, I feel that my confidence in my gender and orientation is much better. GSA is a club for all sorts of people. It is educational and a supportive group. It's from a 6th grader.
Thank you for listening to our students.
Thank you for sharing.
I need to shorten my statement a little bit because as I walked out the door, my 8th grader sent me her statement. So I will give a very abbreviated piece of mine, and then I will read her letter. First of
Ma'am,
all,
if you
it
could
was
please
really
state
great.
Could you
Pardon?
please state your name and
Oh,
city
I'm
of
sorry.
residence for the
My
record?
name is Teresa Morin, and I live in Thornton. It was really great to hear all the good stuff that's going on in the district, and unfortunately, that's not all that's going on. The event at Stargate made me dive into the discipline matrix for both Adams 12 and for Stargate, and they are frankly a joke. The entire system is in place to protect perpetrators, not their victims. That's not okay. When I look at this matrix, there's nothing that is grounds for immediate expulsion, including bringing a firearm to school. That only gets a student referred for expulsion. The way I read this, assault, my guess would be including sexual assault, can have a potential referral for expulsion or transfer to another school. If you were the victim of an assault or your child was a victim, would you want them knowing that the perpetrator could be back or allowed to attend another school where they can do it to someone else? In the age of online school, there is absolutely no reason why crimes such as assault or possessing a weapon should be tolerated. When do the rights of all the other children start to matter? And this is what my daughter wrote. Due to the incident last week, I don't feel safe at school. The safety measures are not doing their job to protect the 1,000 kids that go to our school. One student's needs were put above everyone else. I get yelled at for swearing at lunch, but he brought a weapon, assaulted 2 teachers, vandalized property, assaulted another student. Sorry, I can't read her writing. Seemingly making no effort to protect anyone else. It puts students, staff, administrators, and people living and working nearby in danger. He went off campus, which means the danger existed outside of the school. Adults will just tell us to talk to the counselor, but talking about how I feel with someone I barely know will not protect me from being shot when this kid escalates. I love being at school, and that has been taken from me. These safety measures are making it worse by being useless. I don't want the people I care about, staff and peers alike, to be shot or be put in life-threatening danger. It is straight up neglectful to do absolutely nothing. If nothing is done, I will not stop pursuing this personally. As a student, I will do the right thing, because isn't that what you're teaching us to do? It is hypocritical to teach us kids to do the right thing when the people in charge of our safety won't do the right things themselves.
Thank you.
The next speakers are Zachary Nix, Logan Walsh, and Davion Turner.
Hi, I'm Zachary Eversnix, and I go to Thunder Vista. And I know I live in Colorado, I think. I live in Brookfield? Yeah. Hi, I am a transgender bisexual male who goes to Thunder Vista. I go to GSA every week on Tuesdays, along with my fellow LGBTQ plus students. And we need GSA because for some of us it is the only place we feel safe in a safe space. We did not choose to be LGBTQ plus, just like how you do not choose your skin color. And we deserve to have normal rights just like all the other kids in our school. And Thunder Vista is great in the fact when I came out to my school was the first on board to accept me for who I am. And they understood that it was not a choice to be born this way, and it was just who I am. And my 7th grade social studies teacher was the best about it. She immediately told all the teachers my new pronouns and name. She even this year just hung up a bunch of pride flags in her room. She is the best teacher we will ever get. And I'm sorry if your kid has to say their pronouns in class, which only takes 2 seconds, by the way. But those 2 seconds mean a lot to kids like me in the LGBTQ plus community. Because at the end of the day, we just want to be accepted and loved for who we are and who we love.
Thank you, Zach.
My name is Davion. I live in North Glen, and I'm non-binary. A musician must make music. An artist must paint. A poet must write if he is to be ultimately at peace with himself. What a man can be, he must be. If the essential core of the person is denied or suppressed, he gets sick. The writer of this is Abraham Maslow, best known for his concept of Maslow's hierarchy. The idea that humans need 5 specific aspects to not only sustain their life, but to thrive the way they want to thrive. Those 5 aspects goes as follows. Self-actualization, the desire to become the best version one can be. Esteem, the desire for respect, confidence, and stability. Love, the desire for connections, friendships, and loving oneself. Safety, the desire for security and stability. And psychological needs, the base needs of an intelligent organism. Here's a rhetorical question. Do you think kids, teenagers, and young adults are exceptions to this concept? When I went to my past school, I was lucky if a teacher knew my name. I learned that many educators prefer content over character, opting out of spending even just a minute or two at the beginning of class to check in with students. According to Abraham, a renowned psychologist, building relationships, building trust, letting people be vulnerable and express themselves in comfortable environments is crucial to personally thriving. If one loves to draw and is pretty damn good at it, why reprimand them for doodles on a study guide? Why refuse to grade a paper just because it went over 1,500 words? Why opt out of simply and genuinely asking students while doing attendance the time-long question of how are you? Now, this isn't generalized. Vantage Point is a fantastic example to show that teachers are passionate in teaching. But as special as it is, Vantage Point shouldn't be the extent of it. I know all teachers have a passion for teaching, and I believe that all teachers should have the opportunity to show that passion for teaching outside of grading stacks of papers. By no means should it be required, but it should be encouraged, actively encouraged, because it strengthens community, it strengthens students, it aids education, and it helps us take steps towards healing, knowing we are not alone. I don't have the space nor the power to institute rules or solutions in schools, I know that. But you do, school board. Teach your teachers to build meaningful relationships and communities, and I promise you the average test scores and district attendance will positively reflect that change. Encourage them to take a few minutes out of their class to check in with students and make sure they're okay that day. Let us heal and take mental health breaks, because we have bad days, and on those days, some of us might just want to draw. Because an artist must paint, and if you take that away, our core personality will inevitably take a hit. Letting those personalities thrive will lead to better students, better relationships, and better communities in schools. That is a guarantee. Look towards Abraham Maslow or the teachers of Vantage Point High School for proof. Or come talk to me, because I'd be happy to show you that a school is a community of musicians, artists, and poets, and more. So help us build those communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Davian.
Was Logan Walsh present? Okay. The next speakers are Mike Kepler, Christina Ross, and Molly Haps.
My name is Mike. You tricked me there. My name is Mike Kepler. I'm actually a resident of Longmont, Colorado. I'm principal at Coyote Ridge Elementary. I just wanted to come. I wanted to come all year and speak directly to the board and thank them for, and our superintendent for their ongoing support. I have been a principal now for 19 years, and for the last 7 years, I've been at Coyote Ridge. And I can say in Adams 12, the amount of support that we're provided at the elementary level is truly outstanding. That includes coaches in our buildings, SEL, assistant principals, and soon-to-be GT teachers. And through all of that, I feel like our board and system is focused on doing what's best for the academic and social-emotional well-being of our students. And I brought a couple notes from students that I just asked today, a couple fifth graders who are reflecting on their time, their elementary years, as they get ready to go on to middle school. And I won't read their names from what Francis mentioned. Coyote Ridge Elementary has changed my life as a student leader and just an overall person. Coyote Ridge is filled with amazing people and staff. The teachers here have helped me through a lot, and I feel I can talk to them and still feel like I'm in a safe environment. To me, school is about being able to learn all the things I need to learn while still having fun and being surrounded with nice and inclusive people. And I think Coyote Ridge has done that for not just me, but hopefully everyone else. I think that Coyote Ridge is really impacting my life in a positive way and is helping me realize what my future might look like. Coyote Ridge has made me feel like I belong and that I can find my people, even if it takes a little while. Also, if you might have made a mistake or done something wrong, they don't yell at you. They help you get through the problem in a calm and helpful way. I love Coyote Ridge as a place, school, and it feels like home. And then from another student to Dr. Mike. I think Coyote Ridge has been the best experience of my life. Everyone at the school is so nice and willing to listen and help me and my peers every step of the way. I think the learning at Coyote Ridge has been both helpful and rewarding to who I am today. I truly think that if I had gone to another school, what I like in myself would not have shone as bright as the light I see inside of others, as well as people I don't even know. The leader I see in the future in myself is strong, brave, and kind. I hope that everyone after me and on will feel loved and safe at Coyote Ridge, because I want them to feel what everyone should. These 6 years here have changed my life in a positive way, and the work I'm assigned isn't too challenging or too easy. It's just right.
Mike, your time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mike.
Hi, my name is Christina Ross, and I'm a resident of Thornton. We are a Stargate family, and I know you're aware of the incident that happened last week. There was also an incident in the fall that was pretty bad as well, and of that, my son was a victim. My son was chased up onto a stage and had his head slammed against a wall 3 times by the same student. We were given no support, no follow-through by the school. I wasn't even contacted for 48 hours by administration, wasn't contacted by an SRO until a week after the incident, never encouraged to press charges, and I feel like that is a total disgrace to a victim situation. We were never followed through on anything, and we were very discouraged from pressing charges in the fall, and I feel like we could be in a very different situation with this said student had we been encouraged to press charges or been really given the opportunity to. And I feel like we didn't because we had compassion, and compassion has gotten us nowhere. It has not given this student the help that he needs or put them in a place where that is better suited for them. And there's just a couple things I'd like to mention, and that is that in the fall, it was his fists and words, and this time it turned into weapons. He dismantled a PVC structure and used one of the PVC sticks as a weapon. He was given a carabiner to use as brass knuckles. What happens next time? I feel like the student has no place at Stargate. Admin has done very little to keep the students safe. We were offered no safety plan. Sorry, a couple notes here. If our normal kids were violent, then they would no longer be at the school. And that's the sad thing, is the student is more protected than any of the victims. And we have a building that's a Adroit building. I'm sure you all are familiar with our Adroit building. There are many, many things in there that could be used as a weapon and turned into a weapon. So where does this stop for this student? And I know that there are things in place. Even when adults had eyes on this student, it didn't stop. So I'm asking for your help in taking a stronger disciplinary role in what happens to perpetrators in the school environment.
Thank you.
Excuse me. My name is Molly Haps. I'm a resident of Thornton, also a Stargate parent. I want to start off by saying my father was a high school guidance counselor for 32 years and has built many programs around the state, so I understand the limitations that schools and districts have. No school is perfect, and I try to keep that in mind when things happen, have realistic expectations. Stargate is amazing. I love the teachers, but there are no checks and balances, and the admin kind of does whatever they want. What I have experienced with physical violence regarding my son at Stargate, he was first physically assaulted by a student in first grade. At that time, Missy Hitchke was the elementary principal. Student got in trouble, was held accountable, missed recess for a week, all was good. Next year, same student physically assaulted my son again. We were given to Sarah Mueller to handle the issue, and all that was done was she told my son and the student to stay away from each other, which turned into my son not being able to play with his friends because the other student was. He became on the receiving end of the punishment. Nothing was done. Next year, another physical assault, same student. I let Miss Mueller know that her idea didn't work, but yet again, nothing was done. I had a teacher at the time who thankfully sent a note, took it upon herself to send a note to the parents to sign, but the admin did nothing. I know of this same student physically hurting at least 4 other students. Nothing's been done. It just continues. This year I struggled. My son was put in all classes with this boy. I reached out to Mr. Wildenstein. I was told there was no documentation. Too bad. I forwarded all my emails. I was ignored. I CC'd Mr. Henderson. I was still ignored. I finally involved Mr. Godowski, who got things moving, got my son moved out of the class. Yet I got in trouble for not following their communication pathways, and it was made very clear that I should have never involved anybody outside of the school. I have spoken to so many parents who have stories like mine. It is not abnormal. The score forces the communication pathways down your throat, and the last level of escalation is the Stargate board, who does what the admin does. There's no checks and balances, and the admin is left to do what they want, or like me, if we evoke other options, we're told we're wrong. The student involved in last week's incident has had multiple other incidents that parents tonight have spoken to. I have known this child since my son was in kindergarten with him at Westgate. My son was terrified of him then in Westgate. He was kicked out for multiple violence incidents. I'm gonna skip. I speak today because this child is unsafe to be in a normal school setting, and his history between Westgate and Stargate has shown that. But Stargate has 0 policies in place to handle this student and to continue to allow this happen time after time. I'm fearful of my son being there. I'm terrified. He will shoot up a school one day, I guarantee it. I'm asking you to put in whatever policies in place that can protect our kids' safety and not look at this as a one-time occurrence, but a history of violence from a child that is at a school that is not equipped to handle this behavior.
Ma'am, your time has expired.
And no policies in place. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The next speakers are Tammy Wilkins, Kim Davis, Rebecca L. Knorr together, and then Kathy Henson. You'll need to turn the microphone on and then wait a moment, please.
Okay. My name is Tammy Wilkins. I'm a Thornton resident. I've lived in this community my entire life. I'm a former graduate of Northglenn High School myself. I am now raising my 5 children that have all attended Stargate since kindergarten. 1 graduated 3 years ago, and 1 will graduate from Stargate this year. My daughter is a freshman at Broomfield High School, and I have a 6th grader and 2nd grade student at Stargate. My kids have all have been wonderful students, and we have had great experience at Stargate. I am grateful to Stargate for their wonderful education. I am here because I am concerned about the recent safety of our students and staff at Stargate with a child that is crying out for bigger help. I think something bigger needs to be done for him. This fall, my son in 6th grade was involved with a student that recently had the most recent incident also. My son was heard on a recorded device telling his friend that his friend was being choked, and he was pretty much saying, "Fight back, punch him back." Because of this, my son was suspended. we talked about what better options he maybe should have taken by going to administration or staff. And, we didn't fight back. I'm not one to gossip. I'm grateful for what my kids in the education and Adams 12 my entire life. And I come from a family of teachers. But, and we all felt we were being compassionate by not doing anything further because we did put ourselves in this family's shoes, hoping that things would be resolved. But I'm here to say that I think, and I am concerned that something bigger and more regretful might happen with the community. So that's why I'm here. And after seeing this video and hearing more about this student, I feel my son and my students and the students there are not safe with him around. I feel like he needs bigger help. I feel after watching the video, if he had a gun, he probably would have used it. That's how I felt. And so that scared me. And I sure hope he can get help. And I'm praying for that because that's concerning. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I am Kim Davis. I'm speaking on behalf of Rebecca Elmore. We are both Stargate parents. She writes, I'm writing to address Stargate's handling of last week's violent outburst from a student, as well as Adams 12 response to this type of violence in the past and this incident. The child who hit a teacher, student, and swung a pipe at adults was allowed to do so because Stargate has fully enabled this child and condoned his conduct in the past. For better clarification, when speaking of this child, I will address him as a privileged child or PG. The PG has had a very long history of death threats to other children, hitting, punching, choking children, and sending one to the hospital, and acting violently for years now. Children do not even report him anymore to teachers or staff because they know that the current administration at Stargate will do nothing about the conduct. It's hard to sweep under the rug that this PG had an uncontrolled outburst when he deliberately put a carabiner around his knuckles to punch somebody. And after years of outbursts, it does not mean that PG has the right to continue at Stargate to terrify students. It is not private knowledge that this child is identified as 2E or as having additional needs, but having additional needs, mental health issues, physical disabilities, or any other classification does not give a child the right to repeated violent outbursts at school. Oh, I lost my place, sorry. Conduct-abiding children and families are being required by Stargate and Adams 12 to ensure violence and extreme stress, and their academics are negatively affected. In other words, Stargate and Adams 12 are participating in abuse of children because they do not want to tell a family that the PG needs to go find an education outside of Stargate because of his repeated actions and the trauma he's inflicted. After the incident last week, the PG attended the art show in the evening, the very same day of this incident. A different child who was in the same situation would not have been let on the grounds. In fact, they would have been expelled after a second offense, and the abuse and trauma to abiding Stargate children would have been minimal. The PG and his family do not have more rights to an education and safety than my conduct-abiding child. Though a charter, Stargate still falls under Adams 12 in several areas. I am letting Stargate and Adams 12 know that you have allowed this abuse for too long, and continuing to do so, I will need to respond with all the legal and constitutional avenues given to me as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Superintendent and members of the board. I'm Kathy Henson. I live in Thornton. I have 2 boys in high school here in the district. I've been listening to some meetings recently, and I also participated in one a couple, 6 weeks ago or so. I know I'm the first one to acknowledge how passionate and emotional parents can become when it comes to school and our children. And I wanted to share a quote that I read recently that resonated particularly strongly with me. It's by the poet Gerhard Frost. It's from his poem entitled The Goal. In parenting and teaching, let this be our aim, not to make every idea safe for children, but every child safe for ideas. And what I've mentioned before when I've addressed the board, is how much I appreciate your efforts and support of our staff to create spaces for all of our students across the district, and how important that is for them to be able to access their information in education because they feel safe in who they are and accepted, and know that there's a place for them, because that's how they're going to find their place in the future. And I think that so much of what they learn is aside from our academics. So much of what has helped my kids become who they are the relationships with their teachers and the free exchange of ideas with their friends in the classroom, in the lunchroom, on field trips. And I value that so much. And I think that our public education system is our hope for the future, in that our kids can become resilient and navigate situations that they will encounter out in the real world, and that's so important for us to prepare them for that. And I just want to say thank you, and especially acknowledging all our teachers this week and for Teacher Appreciation Week. And I offer you my full support in continuing to expand our schools into spaces for everyone, so that every child can find their place in the world through their education here in Adams 12. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
That concludes public comment this evening.
Are we good to go for a little while, guys?
So Lori, I may just jump in and offer some information given what's been shared here. So I know a number of folks here are talking about Stargate-related disciplinary concerns. So a few things that I would share. One is that under its contract, Stargate, just like our other charter schools, has the final authority to make decisions about discipline. We're often consulted to do threat assessments. We're sometimes consulted if there's a special education connection to the incident. There can be legal consultation, both between the charter school's legal counsel and our own. But in the end, the charter school leadership gets to make a final decision, so I wanted to point that out. The second thing that I heard was criticism of our policy, both at the district level and at Stargate, for referring a student to expulsion if there's been an assault or an incident with a weapon. I would submit that same language is in place in all 14,000 plus school districts in the United States, or something very similar. In terms of practice, I'm certain that it's similar, because the Supreme Court requires, before you expel a child, that you give them a hearing. So it's not a summary situation where Dr. Kepler, as the principal, concludes that somebody has a gun in their possession at school and expels them for 365 days. The U.S. Supreme Court, for many years, has said that students have a property right to go to school, and before they can be expelled and denied that right, they have the right to be in a hearing, to engage legal counsel, to have a neutral third party hear the evidence. And so what typically happens in those cases is that a student's initially suspended because we've had some brief opportunity for the student to give their side of the story about what's gone on. The administrator makes a conclusion about whether there's a preponderance of evidence that supports the student violating conduct code or law, and then we set that for a hearing, either in front of an attorney. You could have an administrative law judge. Sometimes we have retired administrators who hear those cases and ensure that the student's given due process. So that's not an Adams 12 thing, it's not a Stargate thing, it's a United States Supreme Court requirement that we do things in that fashion. One of the things that can complicate quite a bit what happens in student discipline cases is if a student has a disability, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act requires that before you remove that student for more than a total of 10 days within the course of a school year, that you conduct a hearing in which a team of professionals knowledgeable about the student, their general education teacher, people who are special education providers, the principal, all come together and they review the student's behavior and determine if it's a manifestation of the child's disability. And oftentimes those findings conclude for students who have behavioral disabilities, emotional disabilities, significant affective needs, that the disability has caused or prevented the student from controlling their behavior. I'm not using the exactly right terms for this. It's been a long time since I've been involved in the nitty-gritty of this. And in those cases, short of some pretty limited circumstances, you cannot remove the student from the school setting beyond the 10 days during the course of the year. There are some exceptions, and usually the amount of physical harm that needs to happen to a student is a much higher level of harm than what most parents and staff members would anticipate, in my experience, to support a removal. So that's some of the legal context that applies here. I know people often don't like that. It's been one of the more challenging things that I've dealt with in my career, both as a school attorney and a superintendent. But it's a common challenge throughout our country and in public schools throughout our nation where you have these kinds of conflicts that emerge. The other thing I would just add is I think Stargate, it's ironic, about 2 weeks ago I received an anonymous letter that was purportedly sent on behalf of a large number of parents at Stargate who claimed that administration was being too punitive and too harsh in its disciplinary consequences for students, and indicated that they would soon be engaging with the board to advocate for more restorative practices to happen at the school. So I think Stargate's probably in a similar position that many schools are in, that we have parents who have very different ideas at times about what kind of discipline is appropriate in the school setting. I've learned quite a bit since the weekend about the allegations that many of you talked about today. I've learned more here in your comments tonight. We'll be sure to have our legal advisors and people involved in next steps of dealing with student discipline issues at Stargate bring those facts forward. But I just think it's helpful for some folks to know that whether it's Stargate, whether it's Adams 12, or whether it's any of the other 178 school districts in Colorado, we have these federal laws in terms of due process and in terms of special education that often restrict what we could otherwise do in terms of discipline. So just want to get that out there.
Chris, can I ask a question real quick? Sorry. Can you help me understand, and maybe this will help some parents as well? I know that we have some privacy laws in place, but a lot of concern that I have heard already is we don't know as parents when the student is going to be back, and that is kind of causing an uneasy feeling. And so what can be or cannot be communicated? I mean, how are these people going to know if they can feel safe, or what kind of conversations to have around their student?
So I don't have a good answer for you right now, Courtney. My interest is always to allow parents to make informed decisions about their child and their participation in school and their safety. I'm also mindful that there's confidentiality things that sometimes restrict quite a bit what we can say. I don't know if our legal counsel here tonight has any answer off the top of his head, but we're mindful about this issue and concern, and we'll find our best path forward in accordance with the law to share what we can.
Thanks. Okay, is it okay if we keep going for a little while?
Can I take a minute, just a break for a minute, please?
So then let's take 5 minutes.
Thank you.
to go ahead and get back to our meeting. Thank you for letting us take that break. Our next item is mill levy oversight presentation, 5C expenditures with the FAC members and Susie Dion.
It should be on.
Oversight, not override.
Good evening. I'm going to just do a quick introduction. We've got Kathy Henson and Neva Martinez here this evening to do the presentation. You received in your board packet a PowerPoint that goes through all of that. They're going to then just give you some talking points and updates instead of going through this slide by slide.
Hi, I'm Neva Martinez for all the new board members. I am here today to talk about how we have updated our process this year. This year we had a completely new process, and through that process it created a lot of operational awareness of the district and the different areas, and it allowed us as committee members to better understand each aspect of the monitoring report and really have a direct impact on what was being said in our own observations as well. One of the things that really pointed out is we had a lot of guests come in throughout the year from different areas of the district. And the one that I really enjoyed was the presentation done by the IT department to talk about 21st century learners and what they're doing to help promote that. And some highlights from that meeting that I really enjoyed hearing was that they have done a lot of community outreach to those students who have qualified for reduced lunch and helping them get IT services that they need and setting up some help desk type programs to be able for parents to come and ask questions as well as educators. And what they've seen, and I thought was really important and I wanted to point out, is that the questions they're getting are more about how to use the applications, which really showed that educators are better understanding their technology and they're asking better questions, which will subsequently help with preventing any cyber attacks because they're more aware of things they're clicking on and the devices they're using. So I just thought that was a really great presentation, and I wanted to point out that the IT department has done a really great job this year.
Thanks. Hello, Kathy Henson again from the Finance and Audit Committee. One area I wanted to speak about very briefly are the investments and funding allocations for the Learning Services Department from the 5C bond. And obviously we've made a big investment in education technology, which was put in hyperdrive due to the pandemic. Those are very necessary and valuable investments. Now that we're back in person full-time, we won't be leaning into those quite as heavily, but they'll still have a lot of great applications in the future. We've been making great updates and have new curriculums in math and social studies, an investment in new literacy programming at the elementary level, world languages, and also our career and technical education, of course. Those things were kind of already underway before COVID-19 interrupted learning. And one thing we've definitely seen is that our investment in education interventionists, academic interventionists, will be even more critical as we are trying to fill in some of the learning gaps that have now occurred as a result of the pandemic. One program that was delayed and not able to get started because of COVID is the new teacher leadership program, which is going to be really beneficial to staff. They'll be selecting teachers who are identified as highly effective with very positive outcomes in the classroom to become mentors for their peers. And there also will be 2 coaches hired at the high school level to help coach our staff to become even more effective. hoping to build a culture of peer support throughout the district so that we are attracting the best and brightest, retaining them, and also helping develop them into the best educators they can be and have the best outcomes for our students. And of course, there'll be a continued emphasis on social emotional development and mental health support.
One of the things I wanted to also highlight is the functional areas that we were presented with throughout the year showed no major changes to report to the board. It looks like everything has been maintained and working properly according to everything that we've received and from all the presentations that we had. And I did want to highlight that one of the observations we made was that we are keeping our commitment and our promises made in the mill levy to the voters, and there's nothing additional that we would like to report today. Oh, do you guys have any questions for the Finance and Audit Committee?
Anybody have any questions?
I just want to say thank you both for being part of the committee, being the board liaison. You two have such insightful and meaningful comments and feedback. So thank you both.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nevi and Kathy. All right. Next, we have Amy Baca-Ohlert from President of CEA. Do her quarterly update for us.
All right, hello, good evening. It's good to be here with you all. As to this week is Teacher Appreciation Week, and of course, want to appreciate and thank all the amazing educators who, I think earlier this week I was testifying on a bill and said, you know, over the last 2 years, our educators have shown heroic efforts, but it's really heroic efforts in non-pandemic times as well. Our educators are always going above and beyond to educate our students. And so while of course it's nice to have the little lunch or the cupcakes and the things like that show appreciation, we've been really committed in talking about what are the systemic things that we can do to actually impact the lives of educators. As we know, as I've shared with you before, we are at a crisis point in our profession with a major shortage that we have seen the effects. Mr. Godowski spoke to a lot of that today at the PEBC event about what that has meant for our districts, for our students, the substitute shortage, the bus driver shortage, all of those things. And so what I wanted to share with you all tonight about our CA work is a fiscal project that we're working on, because as we know, and Chris spoke a lot to this today as well, our funding is a significant challenge for our ability to appreciate our educators and to pay them a living and sustainable wage, and to keep them in the profession. We hear often from our teachers who are working 2 to 3 jobs just to make ends meet. That's not healthy, that's not sustainable. We are over $3,600 below the national average in per pupil funding in Colorado. A current senior has never experienced a fully funded education in Colorado due to the budget stabilization factor, the mechanism the legislature instituted to basically underfund our schools every single year in order to balance the budget. And we could go on and on with the statistics. We are the worst in the country for starting pay for educators. We have the largest pay gap in the country. Lots and lots of statistics for us not to be proud of as Coloradans. So I think many of you know over the years we've come together in various coalitions working together as school boards and districts and community partners on funding fixes at the ballot, because that is the only mechanism we have in Colorado. We are not like other states where their legislature can institute something like a sales tax and put money towards education. The only way we can increase revenue in Colorado is by a vote of the people, and that is a significant challenge, as we've learned over the years. So the last attempt that we made at the ballot, you may remember, we actually didn't make it to the ballot because we were unable to gather the signatures. It was during COVID, and that was a barrier in and of itself. But we paired up with a lot of national partners to do some deep analysis, because we obviously have not been successful at the ballot yet to date. So part of that analysis led to the creation of what we call the Together We Thrive table, which is a coalition that has come together that is really looking at a long-term path towards a sustainable funding fix, or essentially a ballot measure. So that coalition is made up currently of labor, so CEA, SEIU, AFL-CIO, as well as community partners, UNE, which is United for a New Economy, COPA, the Colorado People's Alliance, Great Ed Colorado, Together Colorado, which is a faith-based organization, and then some of our policy groups in our state, the Bell Policy Center and the Colorado Fiscal Institute. And so we are using a lot of that analysis in the national research. We're connected to national partners because we really recognize that, that definition of insanity. You can't keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So we're really in the kind of base building and education stage right now to really educate our voters and help people understand taxes are complicated. And in Colorado, we have a lot of laws that make them even more complicated to explain to people and to really get people to understand. And so I wanted to share that work to just kind of let you know that it's out there. You'll hopefully be hearing more about it, have opportunities to engage, because this is going to take something that Chris, I think, did a wonderful job today calling on the business community to really partner with us. This is going to take us all to solve these problems that we're facing in education. If we want a world-class public education system, we have to fund that and support that, and it will take all of us coming together to do that. So that is what I wanted to share tonight. I never like to take a lot of your time because you have very important work to do, but I'm always happy to be here and answer any questions that you may have.
Anybody have any questions? So I've been dialed into this whole, the fiscal fix too. So I'm always committed to doing what I can to help support that. So I look forward to this season.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
good to see you all. Thank you.
You too. Thank you. It's always good to see you too, Amy. All right. Next on the agenda, we have Blueprint 2032. Priscilla?
Good evening, board members. It's my privilege to just give you a really quick update on where we are in regard to our Blueprint 2032 work. As you heard President Goldstein refer to her in her public comments, we've had the opportunity to meet both with our LRPAC, our Long Range Planning Advisory Committee, and the Blueprint Task Force in the last 2 weeks. I'm going to focus on the Blueprint Task Force and what we accomplished during that meeting. So we really had 3 specific goals for that meeting, and one was to review with that committee and kind of recap our fall work with them. We did that intentionally because we needed to prepare them for the activities and tasks of that evening, and we had not met with them formally since November. So we dug back into much of the results of the community survey that had gone out, as we began to talk about the academic visioning work that Bo is leading in his role as Chief Academic Officer. We also highlighted for them some of the lessons learned that had come out of that November meeting. And specifically, what we learned from that task force was a need to approach the work differently. Traditionally, long-range planning is done in a very facility-centric manner. You look at the needs of your buildings, you deal with that first, then you talk about your academic vision. And what we learned from that task force was a desire for us to do it differently, to focus on what is it that we want for our students as we think about the commitment that we have made to our community and to our parents, which is we will prepare students for the next phase of their life, whether that be a 4-year college and university experience, a 2-year community college experience, an industry certification, going into the military, or directly into the workforce. And the committee was clear. Start there, work on your academic vision, and then let's talk about the facilities. So this really provides us the opportunity to engage with our community in a very different way, to talk about what is it that we want for our students to best position them for their future, and then how do we think about reconfiguring our buildings to ensure that our spaces support our academics. We also then have the opportunity to present the task force with some options and ideas for them to help provide input and guidance in prioritization and therefore timelines with all of that. And therefore, once those academic needs are identified, we can really get into continuing with the data and reviewing all the information that we have about our facility conditions, utilizations, and how that supports the programming use. From there, we really moved into an opportunity for Bo to present version 1.0 of his long-range academic vision, which is directly aligned to the data that we receive from our community, our Elevate plan, our equity goals, and really feedback that we had also received from LRPAC. He was very clear that this is 1.0, and he is not sure how high that number will go. Because since we are having the opportunity to bring all of these different viewpoints in at the beginning, it is then our obligation to use that input to continually refine it. And again, that's very different than most school districts approach this work. He also talked with the task force about a graduate profile that he will be working on. And this is really exciting because in addition to the academic expectations or graduation requirements of students, it really talks about what is that profile of the student as they leave Adams 12. What are the cognitive, personal, interpersonal competencies that we want these students to have. It's more of those soft skills that are directly aligned to some of the board ends that I remember us working on years ago. But that's a great piece because it's really what is the foundation for these students as they are leaving us as human beings. So that was exciting as well. So we spent the bulk of the time really focused in on 5 different priorities. Participants had the opportunity to really dive into 3 of the 5 and really have some very good table discussion. Bo has all of that information. Over the summer, we will continue to work on that and then reconvene in the fall. So the other thing that we talked with the task force about was really kind of letting them know what our plan is moving forward and what that timeline is. So our ultimate goal is to be able to present to the Board of Education a plan in the spring of 2023. And for that to happen, there are 4 specific things that must be accomplished. One is the completion of a long-range academic plan. The second is the completion of a facilities assessment, and that is currently underway. The third is a creation of new district educational specifications. That will occur once the long-range plan comes into focus. And the final one is the development of a new academic and facility options that we can put forth to the community for their input and then bring to the board. So that was our opportunity to meet with that group of people, and we really look forward to the work that will occur over the summer and beginning those task force meetings again in the fall. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Anybody have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, a budget update from Susie. I see her running over with her laptop.
I needed to sit closer to the podium. It's a long run. So this evening, I'm going to do, the update is going to be just a little bit different. There have not been any changes since for the current fiscal year, the 22-23 fiscal year that we've been looking at. But there are some adjustments that I think we need to discuss for fiscal year 23-24. And some of that comes in also because as part of our monitoring report that you will get in June 2.3, we're required to give you a 3-year forecast. And so I was at a meeting just about 2 weeks ago, the Colorado School Finance Project meeting, and we got some information that I think is important to share. So we've been talking about inflation that they'll be using for school finance for next year is 3.5%. The assumption that the calendar year 22 inflation by the end of this calendar year, which would be used for 23-24, right now that estimate is 7% for inflation. The reason that is important also is that impacts base per pupil funding. So base will be increased by inflation, so that's 7%. As informational, the calendar year 23, which would be used for 24-25 fiscal year, is looking to actually go back down to 3.8%. So there is a bit of a blip, I guess I would say, for calendar year 22. But one of the things that made that that impacted this year. So earlier on, we talked about for fiscal year 22-23 that we were hoping for a larger buy down of the budget stabilization factor. That did not occur due to the fact that there is this concern about the additional costs due to inflation and how that might impact what the state will have to fund by increasing base by 7%. So it was bought down less than originally anticipated. It was supposed to go down to about $261 million, and we're looking at $321 million. The original recommendation also from the Joint Budget Committee back in February was taking fiscal year 23-24, that budget stabilization factor, down to 0. And now that recommendation is holding the budget stabilization factor at that $321 million. So with this, there is, along with the district is still looking at having declining enrollment. We're still using 5-year averaging, but unfortunately, we've kind of hit the end of that real benefit of that 5-year averaging, and we're seeing some larger declines. So with both of those impacts, we are looking at a year-over-year change from fiscal year 22-23 to 23-24 of a reduction of 765 funded pupils. In that, we still would see, and with a 7% cost of living and a $321 million budget stabilization factor, we would see an increase in our per pupil revenue. We'd be slightly over $10,000, over almost $10,200. But When we look at that increase year over year with that fewer number of students, we're looking at about $14 million. Whereas this year we were looking at over $18 million. So that same comparison, it's significantly less in that 23-24 fiscal year. The other thing to point out is we had almost planned this year almost $2.9 million for the additional funding for special education, Senate Bill 127. That bill was only funded at $80 million, and when fully funded, we know that total cost is $94 million. My hope is for in 23-24, they will put that additional $14 million in. So I am right now, when you do see forecasts for revenue, I will be including almost $800,000 in a revenue forecast with an assumption that they will fully fund Senate Bill 127 with that additional $14 million. No other changes are anticipated for that bill until fiscal year 24-25, when then those costs will increase by inflation. We do not get inflation in the 23-24 fiscal year. You also received a detailed list of where we see some additional expenditures. One thing I would point out is that anything that we have in any fiscal year that is a one-time that has the potential to be recurring. So for example, in fiscal year 22-23, the current budget has 5 gifted and talented advocate TOSA positions that we had to put in one-time funds. We would expect to move those to recurring dollars. So out of that $14 million, we'd automatically take, we'd put in those 5 GT TOSAs. Other things that we'd also be looking at is if we needed to bring the bond staff that had been paid for by the bond, the general and administrative staff that we're temporarily putting in one-time funds. If there is not another bond approved by voters during the 23-24 school year, we will have to find, we'll have to use recurring dollars out of that $14 million to fund that staff as well. So very quickly, based off of that list of expenditures, that $14 million is spent with step equivalent and a handful of items that are going to be required to be funded based off of where we've built our budget in 22-23. The other thing also to note is that fiscal year 23-24 is also the end of ESSER 3 and our plan for some ESSER 3 spending. And so items also that are in there will be funded that year, but then as we're looking, and you get that forecast also for 24-25, I'll be having to move any of those staff out of those federal funds and finding a home in the general fund for those. Any questions, color commentary?
So the color commentary would be these kinds of future projections showing that we have strong headwinds around what we'd like to do in terms of compensation and programming and support are not uncommon. What is going to start to become a greater and greater challenge for us is the downward drag of enrollment declines and less benefits from averaging. So that is, there are a number of things on here that may break, hopefully to a more favorable place. Maybe the legislature does wind up having resources to buy down the BS factor. I saw something today in Chalkbeat where some are saying, given the governor's latest proposal around property taxes, perhaps they'll do some of that next year. You never quite know. There are some items like health insurance where we've been very fortunate for a long time now not to have a 10% increase, but I know from peer districts that most of them have had a year or so recently where they've had increases of that magnitude and we've been able to avoid it. So at some point your luck runs out. So I think it's helpful to see this. The most important thing for me is to make sure that we're accounting, especially on the staff side, for future years about things that are either funded by one-time money or that we might need to curtail if ongoing revenue doesn't come in the way that we want. I think oftentimes people just kind of lose track of these items, forget about them, and then they rear their ugly heads later on after you've already adopted a budget and someone says, oh, we forgot about X, Y, or Z. So the part that I appreciate with Susie and team is that they keep good track of these items so that we can deliberately discuss how to fund them or how to reduce them, and that we can keep you all on the loop too. I just hope in the end that we get some more revenue in beyond what's projected, or next year is going to be a challenging year.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? Thank you, Susie. Okay, on to the elementary reading resource. I would entertain a motion to adopt the district-selected instructional materials Benchmark Advance and Lexia Power Up for district-wide use as recommended by the Learning Services Department.
So moved. Second.
All right. Okay, gang, you're up.
Good evening, board members. It's nice to be with you again tonight. We are back per your request to provide some follow-up information to the presentation that was made 2 weeks ago regarding our pending resource adoption for elementary classrooms in Adams 12. I was not here 2 weeks ago, so I do appreciate the opportunity to call out the work of this group behind me, along with a handful of others on our district literacy team who did tremendous work this year on a very urgent timeline, managing a lot of things simultaneously. Work happening at the state level, going out and visiting work that's underway at a lot of other Front Range districts, engaging a variety of stakeholders, that got us to a point tonight to move forward with a request for a resource adoption that we think is representative of what we need in our classrooms, aligned to our commitment to the science of reading, and well vetted and anticipated by our stakeholders, particularly our teachers and administrators here in Adams 12. So we tonight are going to not rehash. By the way, I think we win the award for most attachments in board docs tonight when I looked at it. We added one more from what we provided you last week, which is this PowerPoint, where we're going to touch on a few pieces. We're going to give you some more financial details about this resource adoption. We're going to share what we know right now about first steps with implementation and professional learning for both administrators and teachers. Some idea of what the early stages are going to look like for that work. We'll talk a little bit about parent engagement opportunities and notifications, some pending work that we hope to have with an outside consultant. And then, of course, we'll be happy to take some questions. So I'm going to turn it over to the stars of the show here, who are going to take you through the information we have tonight.
All right, good evening, board. Just a little bit of a refresher. Last time we were in front of you, you'll remember that we brought two resources for you, both Benchmark Advance and Lexia Power Up. Both of these resources are on CDE's approved advisory list and both align to the science of reading. Benchmark Advanced is one of the core reading resources, and then Lexia is a supplemental resource. And included in your board docs are how both of those scored with our 6230 committee, and then also the comments from that committee, and both were unanimously brought forward by that committee process. So you can certainly refer to those in all the numerous board docs that we gave you this time around. Included this time, as Bo mentioned, we have some financial information for you. We are requesting with Benchmark Advance just a little over $3.9 million for purchase of these resources in all of our elementary schools and K-8s. And when you're in your board docs, if you click on that dollar amount, it gives you a little bit more depth and detail about exactly what that will be including at each grade level, but there's a summary as well on this slide. It is both the print and the hard copy of the resources in the first year for all of our elementaries and K-8s. And then we also receive Benchmark's phonics program is on the supplemental list, and we receive that as well as part of this program purchase. In kinder and K1, we're planning for 25 students per classroom, which fits with what we have worked with Matt Schaefer and our projections department, and able to see that we'll have enough resources, both for all of the student consumables and the My Reading, My Writing consumables for our students. And then when we get to grades 2 through 5, we're planning on 30 students for those consumable texts. And then we also, you can see in our purchasing, we receive all the decodable readers, and there's 39 titles of decodable readers in kinder and 72 titles of decodable readers when we get to first grade. So we're getting quite a few texts and quite a few consumables for students as part of this purchase and part of this package. And again, the consumables are part of the ongoing purchase that we'll receive year after year as part of this 6-year package. So when we were negotiating with them, we're getting quite a lot because of the 6-year agreement. When we look at funding sources, how we anticipate paying for this, because this is a pretty hefty dollar amount, we do plan on taking $3.5 million from our elementary and secondary ESSER funds, the emergency school relief funds, and then $500,000 from our curriculum and textbook account that we have here at the district. You'll notice later that we would like to, if we receive this grant, you'll have on your consent agenda the opportunity to approve consent for this grant, and if we receive it, it would offset $500 or $500. Boy, that wouldn't be a lot. $500,000 of this total expense, which would be outstanding. So we're really looking to offset any potential expenses that are associated with this, because it's a pretty hefty purchase, as I mentioned. Also included, as we were negotiating with Benchmark Advanced, we receive some professional development that goes along with the resource. For the first $300,000 that we spend, we get 1 free day of professional development that is provided, and that's included up to the first 25 days of PD. Now, that sounds like a lot, but it'll be utilized pretty quickly, because we like to keep our PD sessions small and meaningful for our teachers. And so we'll, pair many of those professional development opportunities or days together for our teachers here in May, which Trina will be talking about, and also in August for our teachers, so that they have, again, small PD sessions, meaningful opportunities to engage around the resource and how the resource can be implemented in their classroom, and really how to have the appropriate professional development to support the science of reading in implementation. But then we also have negotiated that any additional professional development days that we would ask or need them for would be at $2,800. So you're gonna hear Trina here talk about what our plans are for implementation of professional development.
Thank you, Kim. Good evening, members of the board. Great to see you again. So talking a little bit about professional learning, I think one thing that's important for you all to know, a value that we have on our team, is the importance of curriculum and instructional materials, but we value more how the teacher uses those materials and that curriculum in their classroom. And as such, all of our professional learning that we have designed so far really will be in service of supporting teachers and principals as we move toward this implementation, not just of the resource, but the evidence and scientifically based reading instructional practices. And so in May, we have our initial educator training, which I have to give kudos to Benchmark because they've got the trainers in place. I've probably met with them for about 4 hours, and they don't know for sure that we have approved them. So a little shout out to them for being so flexible with us. But we are planning K1 sessions, second grade sessions, and 3 through 5 sessions next Friday. Those will be live virtual sessions that we've planned collaboratively, but they've really taken the lead based on their resource and their experience in knowing what will set teachers up to be most successful now so that they feel confident as they can coming back in August and really digging into the planning. We have then a principal meeting, well, I shouldn't say then, the day before that, we have a principal meeting where we're going to get into some beginning conversations around the vision of the elementary literacy block, talk about some high-level look-fors, how that's connected to this idea around leading for equity. We don't want our principals to feel like we have all of these siloed initiatives, but rather how do these come together in service of increased performance and growth for all of our students. We'll talk about expectations for resource use, our current thinking in that space, and then we'll share some daily schedule recommendations, which we have shared with you in your board presentation. We'll talk about master schedule implications, as there are always a lot of considerations when we think about serving students who are multilingual learners, thinking about students who might be on IEPs or need intervention. We want to be really thoughtful about what are we pulling them out for and why are we pulling them out for that. And then we'll also talk with principals about our initial professional learning plan. And then connected to this, ongoing READ Act training updates. Linked in this presentation is our most recent communication to ensure that everybody is getting the information about how to submit their documentation, where to submit their documentation, what the timeline is. So we'll have another go at it with principals on that Thursday. And then June 2nd or June 8th, principals get to choose. They will attend a session, we're calling it a literacy leadership session, with their instructional coach, and we're gonna go a little bit deeper. We'll spend half the time really thinking about the high-level learning around evidence and scientifically based reading practices, what to look for, how to set up the conditions in your building so that teachers feel psychologically and physiologically safe to start to take those risks and be in a learner stance. And then we'll spend the next part of the time thinking about the resource and digging into the resource material so that principals also have, at a high level, here's what I would expect to see K-5 across my classrooms. Here's what I would expect to hear as teachers are planning, and here's what I would expect to note and notice from students as they're in classrooms. So that's kind of our high-level piece coming up soon. And then as we've thought about professional development continuing, we do have a session tentatively planned for August 10th that is prior to our students coming back. And those sessions will again be grade banded. So we'll have K1 together again, second grade, third through fifth grade. We're gonna do 90 minutes again, live virtual, and then there'll be some supporting planning documents and some structured time for teachers to work in their buildings directly connected to what that professional learning is. Instructional coaches and administrators will also be part of that and supporting what that will look like. We have 2 early release meetings every month will be dedicated to reading instruction. It doesn't mean that every teacher will be coming in on those Wednesdays and only talking about reading. What it means is there might be opportunities for schools to say, hey, we need some more support from Benchmark Advance. We're really focused on our reading instruction time the second Wednesday. We have 5 or 6 other schools that need the same thing. We band them together and then we can provide that just-in-time support. It also might mean that building leaders are dedicating that time for data-driven instruction conversations where teachers are beginning to bring some of the student work directly connected to implementation, looking at through a pretty facilitated protocol. Are students making growth? Yes, great, let's keep going. No, they're not. What do we need to adjust and how do we ensure that we're catching that sooner before the gap widens even more? It also might look like that just-in-time support based on what we do with instructional leadership teams. So just knowing that we have that very predictable routine that will start in August and continue all the way through next May. We also plan to host some huddle calls. That's an idea that's come out of Adaptive Schools, and it's really centered around if we have problems of practice popping up across the system, and there's some that are in common, and we know that it's not something we would do with our instructional leadership team, a whole school might not need it, we can put out a virtual huddle call and have a group of teachers come together and meet with, you know, a reading expert, an instructional coach, someone on my team, someone on Marie's team, to work through that in common problem of practice before school, after school, if there's in common planning. So we're going to give that a go and see if we might get some traction in that space, just to make sure teachers are getting what they need when they need it. And then we have plans for our digital literacy partners. They'll participate in some professional learning that's very specific to the online and digital resources available on the Benchmark Universe platform. We don't want any educators in the system feeling like they have to go back and implement every print and digital resource that's available to them right now. And so we'll work closely with our digital literacy partners to ensure that we have a slow and responsive implementation there, and that we're meeting the needs of our buildings and our individual teachers. And then, as always, that subsequent professional learning is needed. We will rely heavily on feedback from our teachers and our principals in terms of what we might need to adjust, add, revise to ensure that we have a successful implementation. So moving into the recommended instructional minutes for our literacy block, I won't go into too much detail here, but obviously happy to answer some questions. We did not change the amount of instructional minutes dedicated to literacy. We, at the elementary level in particular, have to be really careful that we don't take away important math instruction, science instruction, social studies instruction, the SEL time, lunch, electives, and so we didn't adjust any of that time in terms of what's available. What we did adjust and align to was the instructional model and framework that lives within Benchmark Advance. And that really is a nuanced piece that could be different for some of our educators in that there's a lesson where the teacher maybe has the whole group, teaches a very direct lesson for 10 to 15 minutes, and then the students have immediate practice time right after that. Then we come back, the teacher teaches, you know, maybe some vocabulary, does a read aloud, and then the students go back and immediately practice. That is different than the traditional, I teach all of my whole group reading for a prolonged period of time, and then students have literacy stations or literacy centers for 45 minutes. And so there'll be some adjustments and some conversations that we'll have in that space. We do have places where teachers are already practicing and trying that out, but it might be new for some of our teachers. When we think about progress monitoring year one of implementation, as I alluded to before, our main goal is to ensure that we really have that safe environment for teachers to be in the learning zone and really understanding not only the resource, but really understanding that thinking about the instructional vision so that they can adjust their practices as needed based on the needs of their students and based on what we know about evidence and scientifically based instruction. Some anticipated data sources will be that of walkthrough data, where we're walking through as teams or individuals with building leaders, with instructional coaches, ensuring that we have implementation with integrity, and also calibrating our understanding of really what does that mean to have high quality instructional practice aligned to those evidence and scientifically based reading instruction. And then we don't know what we're going to call this yet, so we call it Implementation Advisory Committee. Not sure what the name will actually be, but that's really when we think about getting feedback from everyone who is part of this big project. How do we ensure that educators' voice, principal voice, learning services voice continue to be at the table to guide and inform what we need to do to ensure not only successful implementation, but that we're getting at what our students need. What do our educators need? What do our students need to ensure that we're moving this work forward? And then we'll always be analyzing our data assessment data. As my friends in the assessment department continue to tell me, it's not atypical to see an implementation dip in the performance data the first year. We don't want to, not going for that, but it's not atypical. When we think about subsequent years, we want to continue. We were kind of on track for this. We want to continue to decrease the percentage of students that score below that significant reading deficiency cut point as set forth by the state. And we also want to continue to decrease the percentage of students scoring below that cut point at a rate that's greater than the state. And then continue our increased growth and achievement metrics. Hard to put a number there until we see where our data falls. On MAP in grades 1st through 5th, and then CMAS grades 3 through 5. And then we'll continue to really deepen our own understanding around the assessments that live within benchmark and make sure that we're really thinking about how to use those with intention and thoughtfully so that we're not in this assessing all the time in the absence of teaching. And we'll leverage our ongoing professional learning and utilize assessments to also help us progress monitor the effectiveness of the implementation.
Good evening, Superintendent Chris-Kadowski and board. I want to talk to you this evening about our process and engagement with parents. Throughout this process from the onset with our Reading Advisory Committee, we have engaged with parents and had them come alongside us. And part of that is just really important for us, for parents and families, to have an understanding of, as we engage in this work, we really want to look at the resources and think about how are these resources supporting you in the work that you're leading with your students and your children at home. In this parent communication process, we have had opportunities for the materials to be available through our 6230 process, where families were invited to come in, review the resources, as well as provide feedback. Along with that, we thought it was very important as we make this transition to implementing our new resource throughout our system to have families be engaged in in-person opportunities. So we held evening opportunities where families were able to come in, meet with vendors, ask questions, take a look at scientifically based practices alongside the curriculum, and really begin to think about how these resources would support their students at home. Also, throughout this process, we have been able to think about how do we include information on our website to update and send out communication, as well as we are working on developing a principal toolkit, which will provide principals with communication to send out at the school level, along with classroom teachers to be able to send out classroom level information to families as well. Additionally, we're really excited that Benchmark Advance has weekly newsletters and communication to families that would provide ongoing communication with regard to the learning that their students are experiencing in over 13 languages. So we're very excited that this resource provides that access and entry point so that we ensure that all families and all students are able to have that partnership with students, families, and school. We know that you've also received this communication and this PowerPoint ahead of time. So for your review, we have continued collaboration with our Adams 12 Kid Group, and we're very excited to continue with this work.
Good evening. My name is Heather Gracious. For those of you that I haven't had the opportunity to meet, I'm the Executive Director of Special Populations. It's great to be here tonight. I want to talk to you a little bit about our Lexia Power Up program. This slide indicates the financial expenditures that we will be using for students with disabilities. We have selected the silver package, which includes our 500 student subscriptions, some support for my district team in looking at data and analyzing trends across the district, And then some school success partnership subscriptions, which is when the Lexia folks come and meet with our schools and dig into the individual school data and help to problem solve. So this is just a little bit of information on what the district level partnership and school level partnership looks like. So there's some technical setup, a strategy meeting, which happens before implementation of Lexia, a success planning meeting, which really helps the district and schools to identify what this looks like and sounds like whenever we're implementing. It gives us access to a Lexia Academy, which is webinars that our teachers can take and district level staff. And then National Live Online, which are asynchronous on-demand PD opportunities. So this is just a description of the district level and leader and educator level supports with the time required, a brief description, and the professional learning and support that's offered to both the district and school level teams. One of the things that we were pleased about with Lexia is the kind of loose and tight approach to their professional development. So we have the success planning meeting, we move into implementation down to the bottom and have the Lexia Academy and National Live Online, back up to do a little bit more professional learning as we continue our growth in utilizing this program, back down to having those supports of Lexia and Live Online. Then we have the success matrix strategy meeting, which is when we actually look at the data from our students at a large system level and at an individual school level, and then provide more professional learning to our teachers and other educators, and then back up to having data reviews to look at how our students are doing. So we're excited about this different level of support and professional development throughout the first year of implementation. In student support services, we create professional development plans that have two areas of focus for the next year. One that is the analysis of data that serves as the foundation for our instruction for our students with disabilities. And our second focus area is that students with disabilities require cohesive and coherent instruction that's intentionally facilitated collaboratively by adults who leverage strengths. So those are our two overarching focus areas. And then our learning targets for both elementary and K-8 learning specialists as well as secondary learning specialists is really focused throughout the year on deepening our knowledge of the science of reading and leveraging those instructional resources to give our students a full continuum of intervention that they require. So as far as the Lexia Professional Development Plan, we'll have a half-day training with Lexia on August 10th for our middle level and August 12th for our high school level. And then the first ERD of the month for elementary and second ERD of the month for our secondary folks will be surrounded with assessments, how to utilize the resources, and then how to reflect the type of goals that our students need and the services that they require within their IEP. So our hope is to weave the information that we're given with Lexia, as well as instructional practices, the data that we require to make instructional decisions for our students, and then how we document that in an IEP. We will have coaching cycles by our 2 instructional specialists for those buildings who are implementing this, and then for any teacher that is needing more individual support, our instructional specialists will help to provide that for them. So as we progress monitor the use of Lexia, we will be using the information that we gather through coaching cycles. We too have instructional checklists that our administrators and district level staff can utilize as we walk classrooms. We have to report quarterly on progress towards all IEP goals, so that will be another avenue for us to look at to see progress towards the implementation of this resource. We are very hopeful. Next year, we're going to be focusing on content of IEPs and what makes a high-quality, instructionally sound IEP. And so our hope is that we will start to see this type of learning reflected in present levels and evaluation reports, in goals and services for students with disabilities. We'll love to see explicit alignment and collaboration between our general ed colleagues and student support services, specifically on the knowledge that we've been given, the assessments and resources that we have at our fingertips. And then we have at the district level a team that's called CSRI. It's the Continuum of Specialized Reading Instruction team. And this is myself, my directors and coordinators, and our instructional specialists. We meet weekly to really analyze data, look at what we have as far as our continuum, what's working, what's not, and where our focus needs to be. So we're excited to continue to progress monitor this work. We know that we have a lot of work to do in this area, so we are going to continue to look at the components using Lexia and develop our specialized literacy lesson components. We'll continue our Orton Gillingham training that we have about 104 teachers who have completed that. We'll continue offering. We will continue to look at the data from the Lexia implementation and determine if we have a need for more intensive resources. You have learned from the last board meeting that this is what we call an orange level resource, not the most intense, but something that we believe will make a big difference for kids with disabilities. But looking at the data will help us to determine if we have a need for more intensive intervention. We need to continue to look into vocabulary and comprehension resources that are aligned to the science of reading, and writing resources that are also aligned. And then finally, I believe that we'll need to look at research and exploration into mathematics, assessments, and aligned resources. And lastly, the ongoing and continued progress monitoring, reflective of what our students are telling us through the data that they give us. As far as parent communication, we really enjoy our partnership with the Adams 12 Kid Group, and we'd like to continue that by reviewing resources. They partner with us in looking at the Lexia program. We will review our data and give regular and ongoing updates on the work that we have at the district level and continue to get feedback from our families. Our IEP processes will inherently involve parents with our quarterly progress reports and then progress in partnership with our families in the development of IEPs. We have what's called a SEAC, which is a Special Ed Advisory Council, where we do give updates, regular updates to families who participate in the initiatives that we have in our department. And then we meet regularly with our ARC advocates to give them updates on the work that we're doing in our department, and they give us feedback on how we're doing and what they see in the field. So we will look forward to continuing that.
Okay, back to me. We also have a value as a system and have enjoyed the benefits of partnering with outside consultants over the years. And I recently had the opportunity to have a very pleasant phone call with a consultant who I won't name yet because we're just dating right now. Or maybe not even that. It might be like pre-dating.
You've got her first name in the second bullet there, so you're not so good at like secretly dating there.
Thanks. You just blew it because that's her. But thank you, sir.
Yeah, okay.
All right, so this unnamed consultant who may or may not go by the name of Heather, she and I had a very great conversation. It was broad, it was open. She has a lot of content expertise, but I really liked her humility in that she's never been an educator and talked about things that she is not as expertise in. And I think I saw some potential where we could really leverage the content expertise and talk about the journey that we're on. And we plan, this Heather and Trina and Kim, Marie's got some new work to do, so we're going to let her attend to that. But the rest of us are going to go meet with this quote-unquote Heather and explore our potential partnership over lunch here, and we'll have an update for you on what that looks like before our summer recess. So you asked for an update from this team, you get an update from this team. I will tell you, and I hope you see this too, I have tremendous confidence in our ability to execute this plan and make good on the shifts that Director Mitchell talked about during her public comment. This is a resolution about adopting resources. This effort is about making good on our commitment to continuous improvement as a system. We know there's room to grow in terms of our instruction. Our teachers know it. They're up for it. They're ready to go. We have many who've already completed the 45 hours more that are on their way to doing it. And I feel enormously confident in our ability as a district to start down this road and do it thoughtfully and make it stick. And on that point, I think I'm going to spend some time, some others are going to spend some time with our teachers tomorrow, and they are rightfully going to give voice to both their commitment to this work, but want to make sure that we're well aware of all the other things that we ask them to do in taking care of those social emotional needs of kids, They're still learning social studies resources that we just rolled out this year and probably didn't implement as well as we would have liked to if we could have all been in person and not virtual. We want to make sure we do this well and not at a surface level and do it deeply. So when Trina talks about creating the conditions where our teachers can be safe in that learning zone, because we're not asking them just to use a new resource. We're asking them to think differently about how they teach students to read. And to do that well and for it to last, you have to have the grace as a system to let that shift happen over time. So I hope that resolution was a resolution to go forward, because you can see, we knew like procedurally we had to get a thumbs up for you tonight, but this is big work and we have a whole lot of dates lined up. So I hope we get the rose tonight and we can be off and running down the road with this work, because time is short and we're ready to get after it. Questions?
Questions, comments?
We let you go first and then you ask all the questions. So, well, first off, thank you very much for the update for tonight, because I think it was really important for us to hear and to hear you all articulate your plans. I think there's a lot of great information in there that you've included that definitely addresses a lot of, the scary parts of the transition. And so I do appreciate you putting in that time. The expectations for resource use, can you share any of that tonight, or is that?
Yeah, I think either one of us could talk about it.
I can start and then you can chime in. I'm not prepared to share another document with you. But when we talk about expectations for use, it's sort of what I alluded to before. We don't want teachers thinking that they have to use every print and every digital tool that exists every single day. So we'll start off with exactly within the framework, when we're teaching whole group reading, when we're teaching foundational skills, when we're in small group, when students are reading independently, here's the expectation for what you're using within the resource for the first semester or for the first quarter. And then we'll begin to layer on some new components as people get used to that first layer. So that's what we mean when we talk about expectations for use. As Bo just said, we have elementary teachers that are feeling gosh, I'm still trying to get my social studies going, and now science, and now reading. And so we don't want it to be because of compliance. We really want a deep commitment to this work, and we want implementation with integrity so that teachers really feel like, gosh, this is making me better. This is making me better, and when I'm better, my students are better, and they learn and grow. So that's in general what that means. When we have the expectations fleshed out, happy to share them.
Okay, so, but it is implementation using the benchmark and sort of their pacing of each day and what they're guiding.
The only thing that is different is we actually have more time in our literacy block than benchmark. So we have 170 minutes in K2, and their highest pacing guide is 150, which gives us a little bit of oh good, we can breathe a little bit. Teachers can feel like if their transitions aren't really tight, it's okay. So yes, within benchmark, here's the resources, teacher's resource guide, student materials, teacher materials, try out this digital component, this one thing. So yes.
And then, when I've looked at our curriculum before, it sort of has the daily, every day, and so that is all going to be in relation to benchmark. It's not going to be the things that we have in there today. And benchmark has some supplemental materials embedded in it, and so the supplemental materials will be the benchmark that comes with the new resource.
Yes, so Benchmark Advanced 2022 has the phonics component embedded within the core resource. Phonics 2022 is also a standalone that is included on CDE's website, approved advisory list. So if there were districts that didn't want a core resource, they could just buy benchmark phonics, but it's included for us, and that's what's used for the phonics portion of the lessons.
Okay. And I'll try to be quick.
That's
and
okay.
ask. Just trying to circle the ones that Well, one question I had was the Adams 12 kid group, and is there work that we can do together to try to help more parents get connected to Adams 12 kid group? And to me, it almost seems like we need a broader, that's pretty specific in support of dyslexic students, and it has that title in it. But for building some of the supports and helping parents understand, more about science of reading and its generic application for more just struggling readers that we aren't trying to identify or label as dyslexic, just trying to create a group of parents, and it can include the Adams 12 kid group, but just to build that and help parents, learn more about that resource and get connected with that group. And it's been hard because we've been virtual for so long, but.
One of the things we've been working on as a team that I think ties to your question is we're trying to find more ways to invite parents into the work. Being a part of committees, being able to raise a hand and say, I'd like to participate in that. I think there's a lane as we move into this work. If you're passionate about literacy because your student has dyslexia, because your student struggles from some other way, because your student loves literacy, and you as a parent want to know more about how it works, I think there's opportunities to do that. We're really lucky to work with Joe's team, who is excellent at helping us find new ways to reach out and connect. So I think you're right. I think the broader umbrella around it's more than just dyslexia, and still maintaining, I think, the unique perspective that group has for our work is something for us to talk about as a team, which I think we're at a space to think about what would that larger tent look like that we could start sending some invitations out for.
Thank you. And the Lexia, when I first thought we talked about it, it was for secondary, but then tonight you talked about elementary. Now, so are we going to be using it K through 12 or?
Lexia will be for 6-12, but I did want to highlight the work that we're continuing to do at the elementary.
Okay, so that's more about assessments and IEPs and more general.
Yeah, and HD Word, that was an approved resource, is 4-12. So we will be slowly rolling that into the mix.
Okay. And then I had. Are the staff that are going to be trained in using Lexia and using that, are they going to take the CDE 45-hour class or?
So as you know, they're not required. Our instructional specialists are taking it. And we want to be able to pull forward a lot of the learning that's appropriate for 6-12 and integrate it into our ERD schedule.
And then I knew there was one other thing. So when you talk about the IEP work and trying to work on, what's going to be in the IEP and assessments and how you might measure and progress monitor, I was wondering, because I don't think read plans are in your
wheelhouse?
They're not in your, but it seems to me that there's probably, especially in the early grades where read plans are, some of them keep going on past that, and I don't really know how that works, but in the work that you're doing for K-3 with IEPs and sort of sharing that with the read plan and seeing what synergies there are and how we can, because I think parents, your child might start first on a read plan and eventually move to and just having that continuity between, it won't be so foreign to go from one to the other or however they're crossing those boundaries.
Yeah, I think that it's critical for us to be in alignment between general ed and special education and be able to clearly articulate to families the type of plan that their student is on, and what's involved in those plans.
Okay. And I think that's, One last question, and if you don't know the answer to that, but so Benchmark Advance is going to be our core resources. There's some supplemental materials in there. As far as Tier 2 and 3 and SPED for K3, do we know what those Tier 2, 3, and SPED resources are that are going to be utilized in support?
Yeah, so I will be finalizing a document that outlines all of the resources that we'll have available for special education. Do you want to address the Tier 2?
So Tier 2, there's actually two. There's some in-class supports that exist within Benchmark Advance, and then students that are pulled out of class because they're on a read plan at their earliest age, K and 1. Our interventionists are using letters when it's appropriate, their training from Orton Gillingham, or the training that they've had from the science of reading based on what the needs of the students are.
Okay, and I will thank you again for entertaining all my questions and for providing all this additional information. I think it's very helpful. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yes, anybody else? Sorry.
Don't go anywhere because we still have to vote.
Oh, yes, I'm waiting for this.
You can call the vote, Francis.
Director Assad Lucas?
Aye.
Director Goldstein?
Aye.
Director Lockley?
Aye.
Director Mitchell?
Very, 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 very happily, aye.
Director Potter?
Aye.
So I think if the rest of the board would like to join me in a round of applause for these people for all the work that they've done. Give it a standing ovation, too. You definitely have been very thorough in this endeavor, so I look forward to seeing next year how this goes. All right, next I'm going to entertain a motion to ratify the 2022-2023 classified master agreement changes tentatively agreed upon through the negotiations process as presented. And we have Paul and Mila.
So move.
Second.
Good evening. We're back. No new presentation. We shared information with you last time. Paul, you want to give an update about the ratification?
Yep, so we have our ratification vote is complete. It was 307 votes yes to 7 votes no. Lots of great feedback. A lot of appreciation for the district in that investment in the classified employees. So with that, we just say thanks for the partnership, thanks for the collaboration, and we appreciate working with you.
Okay, any questions, comments? Call the vote.
Director Assad Lucas?
Aye.
Director Goldstein?
Aye.
Director Lockley?
Aye.
Director Mitchell?
Aye.
Director Potter?
Aye.
Yay, congratulations. Okay, next. I will entertain a motion to approve funding to replace 10 20-year-old school buses, 4 77-passenger diesel-powered mountain activity school buses with storage capacity at a cost of $148,683, each for a total of $594,732. 2 Type A multifunction buses at a cost of $82,000 each for a total of $164,000. And 4 Type A wheelchair multifunction buses at a cost of $88,800 each for a total of $355,200 for a total investment of $1,113,932. Wait. The dollars goes at the end.
So moved.
Second.
Paul, or Pat. It's
She
late.
just called me Paul. We're both offended.
Sorry, guys. Well, Paul's a better golfer.
Well, good evening, Board and Superintendent Godowski. Let me be the first this evening to also offer you a happy May the 4th. So happy May the 4th be with you. See, I knew Director Lockley would appreciate that. So we applied for a DARA grant last year. DARA is a Diesel Emissions Reduction Act. We applied for that grant last year and were not successful. And we were successful with seeking a grant this year. So what this does is it allows us to save $20,000 per bus, but it still allows you to buy diesel buses. So there's a reason that you see there's 4 buses here that are diesel buses, but they're cleaner diesel buses than the ones that are 20 years old. We need those buses to be diesel because those are the over-the-road buses that we use for trips to like Grand Junction if we go to Wyoming. Our propane buses don't allow for storage under the buses for athletic gear, so that's why those are diesel buses. And then the other buses that we're purchasing are all part of our non-CDL driver program, which has been really successful for us and has allowed us to basically serve students and all of our routes without having to cut routes and reduce that, which is, if you're used to hearing the news stories every fall, you hear about the shortage of drivers. We have those shortages as well, but we have implemented this non-CDL route program and it's been very successful. So this updates those buses and keeps us in the transportation business. Are there any other questions?
Anybody have any questions?
Just a comment that if Bo got the award for the most attachments, I think this would get the award for the longest recommended action that doesn't contain state statute.
But it sure contained a lot of numbers.
I'll take that as a win.
Director Assad Lucas?
Aye.
Director Goldstein?
Aye.
Director Lockley?
Aye.
Director Mitchell?
Aye.
Director Potter?
Aye.
Okay, 5-Star Online Academy lease. I will entertain a motion to approve the encumbrance of $3,636,086.06 from Capital Reserve to allow the 7-year, 8-month lease of 1865 West 121st Avenue, Westminster, Colorado 80234, to comply with Tabor's requirements for multi-year fiscal obligations.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we talked about this a few weeks ago. We did pursue a shorter lease, and the landlord was not interested in actually responding at all to our request to talk about a shorter lease, which is not surprising, but they did meet all the requests we had. So our increased request for tenant improvement work was met. So we're feeling very good. Also, the square footage rental price, the rental square footage price, was also agreed to. So the negotiation went a little bit faster than we thought because they agreed to the terms that we proposed. So feel like this is the next step for us finding a permanent home for 5-Star Online Academy.
Questions, comments? Okay, Laura?
So I just wanted to clarify with Pat and with Phil, tonight we encumber the money for the duration of this proposed lease term, but the lease itself isn't yet negotiated. So do you anticipate the lease will come before the board at a subsequent meeting, or is there some delegated authority for me to sign with notice to the board? I just want to make sure we have clarity about how that will work.
As we currently stand, I would say the lease would come back to the board for final vote. If the board would want to amend the current motion and give the administration the authority to negotiate and execute the lease, we could take care of it right now.
Is there a motion to amend?
Does Lori have to read this whole thing again if we bring it back?
No, we could just add.
Just kidding. I'm happy to amend the motion to allow the superintendent.
Amend the motion to give the administration or give the superintendent and designees the authority to negotiate the terms of the lease and to execute the lease on behalf of the district.
Is that your motion, Laura?
Yes, that's my amended motion, what he said.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
So actually, there was already a motion on the table. What we need is just the original motioner and seconder to agree to the change. And the motioner was Jamie and the second was Laura.
I agree to the amendment.
And I second the agreement to the amendment.
It's called a friendly amendment. Okay.
Director Assad Lucas.
Aye.
Director Goldstein.
Aye.
Director Lockley.
Aye.
Director Mitchell.
Aye.
Director Potter.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you. I just want to point out that that motion was almost as long as well, so.
I'm practicing my literacy skills. Next motion, to approve the purchase of up to 9,000 student Chromebooks, 2,000 staff devices, and 1,000 student tablets to replace end-of-life devices and allow the district to continue the EdTech one-to-one program at a projected cost not to exceed $5,064,370, funded by an EFC federal grant of $3,634,950, and an annual device refresh allocation of $1,429,420.
So moved.
Second.
Hi.
Hello. This is like karaoke hour for me, so if I start singing, tell me to stop. Last year, this is our sort of annual device refresh DIR. Last year, we applied for an ECF grant, which is a federal grant for school connectivity, or basically connectivity for students and devices for students to help support remote learning conditions. That also applies to teacher devices. So we were successful in that grant in getting $6.7 million back from the federal government. Some of that money was spent with the devices that were approved last year because it took them forever to finalize that grant for us. We got that award in late January. So this is the devices for the next school year, and that grant will apply to basically all these devices. They were all covered by that grant. That grant provides for $400 per device for student and staff devices. The gap, that's the 29%, which is the district-funded part of that, is for the staff devices, which cost about $1,100 instead of less than $400. So, questions?
Questions, anybody?
I know we talked about our refresh rate. Is this in alignment with that, or is it higher this year because we had more funds, or? I didn't want to have to go look for the document to figure out what we had sort of set is the annual refresh.
Refresh for devices, or?
Yeah, I thought when we did when we went one-to-one, we sort of then said, you know, where the life expectancy was and what the rolling number
Yeah,
would
so
be.
this is in line with that refresh rate. So essentially, this is to replace end-of-life devices. So these are devices that were purchased before COVID. So the Chromebooks are like 5 years old at this point, which is pretty much past end of life. We're planning based on, depending on which level is using the devices, for a 3 to 4 year replacement for Chromebooks, which is pretty typical in K-12. And so this is in line with that. These devices were purchased well before the ESSER's devices, which is where the bulk of our Chromebooks came from at this point.
I have a question. It's been hard to purchase tech. Is it getting easier yet?
No. It's, we've gone from what happens in the tech world, and certainly with devices, I think we're in better shape than with some of the other components that we need to buy. We know that the devices that will, if this is approved, we'll put in that order quickly. And really what's happening is as the models come in, they're getting sold. So that, like, the bulk of that model group will get sold from the container or whatever, and then they're gone. And then what happens is the device manufacturers are coming out with a new model with a higher price, and so we're chasing prices. And that's one of the drivers for, I know we added this after the sort of cutoff date for the agenda, but for the staff devices, that's our big worry, is that inventory is getting low for that Dell model that we want to buy. And we're worried if we wait for the next Dell model, it'll be a couple $100 more, because that's sort of what we're seeing in the market.
Anybody else?
I was really glad to see the staff devices in there. I know that's something that was a real need, so thank you for doing that. And I just had one other question, and it's sort of related, but I think I saw where we're going to allow students to keep their devices through the summer, but is it K3? K2. And I just wondered what the rationale was for why those guys.
So K2, the sort of the profile that we have in the district right now, K-2 devices stay in the classrooms, and so the K-2 kids won't take their devices home over the summer just to support the model that we have. 3-12, they take their devices home every night anyway. There's a little latitude within the schools to adjust to that, but that's why that group is not in the take home your device over the summer group.
I'll just, this summer may be okay because we really haven't started to work with that kind of getting students in K2 and their parents maybe trained to utilize some of those resources to support summer reading and online. And I think in particular for English language learners, if they don't have English in the home, that having those devices and being able to do audiobooks in the summertime might be something to consider in the future. But
Sure. A couple things I'd add there is any parent of a kindergarten, first and second grader can request this summer if they want to do that. I would agree with you, Director Mitchell, that I think as we roll out Benchmark Advanced, as we add more newcomer and multilingual supports in our system, that we'll see more potential for opportunities for our youngest learners to make good use of devices over the summer. Part of what's included in Jeff's statement there is we also need to continue to support our kindergarten, first and second grade teachers in their dexterity in using those devices. There's a delicate balance with our youngest learners around the just right amount of time on a device and on a screen, and when to really leverage it powerfully and not kind of revert to some of the things that the pandemic forced upon us that were less than ideal for those young learners. But yes, I think conceptually I'm with you.
The other thing I would add to that is we spent a lot of time this year trying to find the right device for those kiddos too. Obviously a keyboard-driven device is a little bit challenging when we're trying to teach students with manual dexterity and things like that. So we've worked a lot with Mary Beth and the ITLS team to try and really zero in on what is the appropriate device for that age group as well, knowing that there's some challenges with asking someone who's just learning how to spell, how to type in the words to log in. So that's a component of that as well.
thank you.
Director Assad Lucas?
Aye.
Director Goldstein?
Aye.
Director Lockley?
Aye.
Director Mitchell?
Aye.
Director Potter?
Aye.
Thanks, Jeff. Culture and climate survey question. We're going to revisit, we were talking about the question about grievances. Do we have any suggested wording?
I did want to let board members know that I added the email that Mila had sent. You can find that down at the bottom of that agenda item in executive content.
Does the board have any input or questions or comments? Is this something where if we want to approve this, I can make a motion and vote on it, or is it something we vote on, or?
I don't think you have to vote on it. I think this is just more informal discussion and feedback to Mila and to myself about if this meets the mark or not, and not something that we'll actually implement until next year.
Okay. So we good with the recommendation? Thanks, Mila.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Minutes? Can I have a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular board meetings of March 16th, 2022, April 6th, 2022, work study session, April 6th, 2022, and April 20, 2022, work study session as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Questions?
Director Assad Lucas?
Aye.
Director Goldstein?
Aye.
Director Lockley?
Aye.
Director Mitchell?
Aye.
Director Potter?
Aye.
All right, consent agenda. I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items E2 and E3 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or questions?
Director Assad Lucas?
Aye.
Director Goldstein?
Aye.
Director Lockley?
Aye.
Director Mitchell?
Aye.
Director Potter?
Aye.
All right, on to future agenda items and calendar. Our work study session, May 25th, and then we have a little bit of reception at the May 25th meeting. Just a note, we're having our second meeting a week later because of graduations. Comments, questions?